9 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game. Feel like this is the Monday where we can all kind of breathe a sigh of relief because the past 2 weeks have been nothing short of chaotic when it comes to what we've done here on The Game in regards to South Carolina's baseball head coaching search. It was on, 2 weeks ago today that Coach Kingston got fired late morning, as we kind of anticipated was going to happen after the Gamecocks got bounced from, the Raleigh Regional. So that happens. We spend that entire week speculating and talking about all the names that had appeared on the list of, potential head coaching candidates, right? Chris Pollard and Cliff Godwin and Landon Powell and all that kind of stuff. Broke those guys down 6 ways from Sunday. And then it was Monday a week ago that the name that came out of nowhere, Paul Mainieri, first popped up onto our timelines, thanks to Teddy Cahill of D1 baseball. And then that just, the wheels started turning on that. Mainieri's hired officially on, Tuesday. We hear from him on Thursday, and we heard everything that he had to say on Friday. And now we get to the point, and it's like, okay, well, now the hay's kind of in the barn, right? Like, we have a head coach. We know what this program's going to be. We know the direction that we're going. Now we just wait and see what the roster's going to be, right? We wait and see what kind of team that Paul Mainieri is going to put together and what kind of team that he's ultimately going to retain, and see if he can go out there and be as successful as he said he was going to be, which, again, he said all the right things. We used the cliche on Friday that I think Paul Mainieri, quote unquote, won the press conference, right? And, now it's about going out there in 200 some odd days when the season starts in February and putting that plan into action. And it was funny. I was talking to my dad yesterday, wishing him a happy Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Hopefully it was a good day yesterday. And we were talking about everything that had gone on in the past week or so, and he said, you guys said the word Omaha probably more than Peyton Manning did last week, and that was honestly the truth. It really felt that way. This is a fan base that's starved for Omaha, right? Been denied over a decade, and most years not even come close to it, which is a far cry from what this program was, so many years ago. So to have somebody like Mainieri coming in and, injecting a little bit of juice back into the fans, giving them a reason to believe, having somebody that they definitively can look at and say, yes, that's a guy that can take us back to the College World Series, that can compete for national championships because he's been there and done that before multiple times, is exciting. And now, again, you just have to play the waiting game until the season gets here to see if all that is going to come to fruition. But again, like I said, now is when the work really begins, where he's here now. He's got a parking space. His name's on the door in the athletic facility, all that kind of stuff. Now it comes down to building your roster. And like I said, maintaining your roster is just as important. We've had a few guys transfer out, Carson Hornung, Austin Williamson, guys like that. So David Cromer jumped into the transfer portal at the end of last week, but you would constitute all those guys under that umbrella of what we like to call healthy transfers, guys that you either anticipated were going to transfer, or them transferring out doesn't really impact your everyday lineup necessarily. Now, yes, Carson Hornung, a former starter himself, had obviously lost his starting job, earlier on this season, so he wasn't really a factor when it came down to it as the season went along. So I don't think you look at what's transferred out from South Carolina right now and say, oh my God, I can't believe that guy's leaving. That's a huge loss, and, all that kind of stuff. Now, you do look at, Cole Messina as a big loss, as he's been the heart and soul of your team these past couple of years. Now, if you did lose him, I think you'd still be okay, but you'd certainly love to have him back. And now he's facing a, tough decision, no doubt about it, where he's going to be evaluated by Major League Baseball here coming up very soon. I don't know the exact day on that, but he said in the interview that he did last week with Chris on the on the Garnet Trust Tower that he's going to take those evaluations and kind of see where he lands with things. Again, the latest MLB draft projections have him around early fourth round, which that's perfectly fine. And, as good of a ball player as we know Cole Messina to be, he can get in somebody's system. We feel like he can work his way through the minors and still be good. But, how enticing to him is that potential chance to go to Omaha? Like here's a kid that grew up, wanting to do that as all these kids had. And, you were playing for a coach that unfortunately wasn't able to get you there. But now you have a guy that has a proven track record of being in Omaha that is laying out this plan for how they're going to get there in year number one. And how enticing is that to a Cole Messina to maybe want to run it back for 1 year more years? Say, you know what? I think I can. I think that I believe in this guy. I think he can really do this. Let's see if if that can happen. And who knows? Maybe you improve your draft stock a little bit. I don't think Cole Messina is going to shoot up to being a first rounder by any means or anything like that. But who knows? Maybe another solid year in college. Maybe you can work yourself into be a second or third rounder. But it's a decision that he's going to have to make. And again, I don't think anybody here would be mad to see Cole Messina, back for another season. Obviously, Ethan Petrie seems like all indications are that he's going to be sticking around, which is obviously great for your offense. Kennedy Jones, Blake Jackson, those kind of guys that have been solid contributors, this past season also seem to be sticking around as well. So you've got a good little nucleus of talent and a good foundation from an offensive standpoint that you do have. Returning, not to mention your freshman pitchers or your young pitchers, Marlott, Pitzer, guys like that, Eddie Copper returning from injury. I believe Eli Jones can return. And listening to Jamie Bradford talk a little bit earlier on this morning, it seems like Eli Jerzenbeck is potentially set to return as well. He's somebody that, we didn't see at all this year after his injury sustained at the end of last season that we didn't expect to even be in the conversation for coming back to South Carolina because I believe he would have been draft eligible. But it seems like he might be in line with coming back too. So, that's a good amount of talent that you're returning, not to mention countless other names on your, pitching staff, which should, generate lots of excitement. Before Kingston was even fired, South Carolina had already, received a commitment out of the transfer portal from Caleb Jones, right-handed pitcher from Winthrop. And again, it seems like he's okay with staying for the Maneri regime. And when you look at his numbers, pretty solid overall. Mainly a bullpen guy in his time at Winthrop, but did get a couple starts this past season. Pretty decent amount of strikeouts, low walks, which is really good. So he's somebody that could certainly come in and be a potentially good leverage guy out of your bullpen, depending on how they want to use him. But respectable numbers. Did pitch against South Carolina a couple weeks ago when Carolina went up the road in Rock Hill and played Winthrop. 1 inning pitch, 1 run, 1 hit, 1 run, and then what's that? I believe two walks there. So not a shutout performance by any means, but solid. And again, something about what they saw in him in that performance probably piqued their interest, and that's why he's here at South Carolina. So already adding to the pitching staff there. They went out and got a JUCO transfer in Caden Gaskins. That was the end of last week from Northwest Florida State College. And, he's somebody that put up decent numbers at that level. So, we'll see what he can, come in and be as far as his impact. And then over the weekend, they went out and got a center fielder from St. Mary's, Dalton Mayshore, Mayshore, one of those. We'll look at the numbers. St. Mary's team that did miss the NCAA tournament, but he went out there and was second best batting average on the team. Hit 13 home runs, very active on the base paths with 11 stolen bases. Good OPS, good slugging percentage, like an all-around very solid player. It seems like a very consistent hitter as well. In 26 of the last 30 games that St. Mary's had this season, which did end with them in the West Coast Conference tournament, did have 26 hits. Hit in 26 in those final 30 games, so very consistent. Was somebody that could potentially slide into that leadoff spot because that's what he was doing at St. Mary's, and obviously Austin Brindling is out of eligibility and moving on. So look for somebody like Dalton Mayshore to maybe be in the mix for that leadoff spot when the season rolls around next year. And again, a lot of parts and pieces to move around. More guys will come into the transfer portal, likely to maybe lose another guy or two. But again, hopefully they fall into that realm of that healthy transfer to where that's not that big of a deal. I saw where it looks like Matt Williams is going to be heading to Coastal Carolina to be their pitching coach after the one season here at South Carolina under Mark Kingston. And Mark Kingston in a funny. I don't know if funny is the right way to describe it. Funny twist of fate, odd twist of fate, however you want to define it, seems to finally be heading to Omaha. He is set to become the next head coach of the Creighton Blue Jays. That is not yet formally announced yet, but Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball was reporting on that over the weekend. And I say that it's really funny because, again, the biggest knock on Kingston here was his inability to get South Carolina to Omaha. So now he's going to be going to the school that plays in Charles Schwab Stadium as their home environment. So he'll be in Omaha each and every day. But seeing if he can get the Creighton Blue Jays back there as he takes over as head coach. Now, and again, I don't think this has formally been announced yet, but their current head coach, Ed Cervais, is retiring at the end of the 2025 season. So I'm not sure if that means that Kingston would come on as an assistant and just be the head coach in waiting, or how exactly they would do that. But that does seem to be Kingston's likely next destination. And let's be honest here, while Creighton is a Omaha team, they're not a team that goes to Omaha very often. In fact, they've only been once in their program's history back in 1991. And looking at Ed Cervais, who is retiring after a 20-year tenure out there at Creighton, has made the NCAA tournament a total of 5 times in 20 years. So once out of every 4 years, just making the tournament. And in none of those did they ever advance to a super regional. And let's be honest, I think that's kind of the perfect place for Coach Kingston. It's kind of similar to what he was doing at South Florida, where the expectations aren't super high. And if you make the tournament every couple of years, hey, it's great, But there's not that pressure of taking a team to Omaha. There's not the pressure of, well, you should be in a super every, 3 out of 6 or 7 years or something like that. Like, I think this is really the perfect kind of landing spot for Coach Kingston and, the level that he was able to get South Carolina to. If he took Creighton to a super regional, I think they'd be over the moon, to be honest with you. But again, those expectations aren't going to be super high. And, I do think that this is a place that he can go and have a long tenure. And look, if he goes there and he turns Creighton into something special, then he might have an opportunity to double back and get another Power 4 job somewhere down the line. But again, I think going back to that and the Big East, just depending on what sport you're talking about, you can define them as a power or you cannot. But I do think that this is the right landing spot for Coach Kingston. And I think a lot of people will be happy for him going there. And if he has success, then that's great. If he doesn't, then, that is what it is. But, Creighton's kind of the perfect landing spot for him to maybe work his way back to being another Power 4 head coach, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe just kind of exist in that Group 5 realm, that mid-major realm, whatever you want to call it. And, is the coach of Creighton for a long time with the occasional pop in the tournament. I think that would make a lot of sense. But, certainly wish Kingston the best of luck. Sorry it didn't work out for him here. But I think South Carolina is very satisfied with what they've got in their next head coach. And, hopefully Kingston can go out there and, be satisfied and, in Creighton as well. So, again, we really talked so much baseball in the past week. It's going to be kind of weird to wind that down a little bit now. And we'll still, obviously, a lot to talk about the College World Series and the wild weekend it was. Tons of walk-offs happened this weekend as, they're making their way through things out there in Omaha. But South Carolina baseball will certainly settle down a little bit more now that the coaching search has ended and Paul Maneri is officially the guy. It's a bit of a weird week. We're not going to be here on Wednesday, and Jen's going to be out actually at the end of the week. So we're moving things up a little bit. We will talk some racing with Jen Jensen as we do typically on Wednesdays, coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along on your Monday here on The Game. I always love telling you about my friends over at Twin Peaks. The month of June, a very busy one on the sports calendar. The NBA Finals continue to roll on, as do the Stanley Cup Finals, and you can take in all that great action with 29-degree draft beers, amazing food, and TVs as far as the eye can see with our friends over at Twin Peaks down in the Vista. Starting on June the 20th, you can join Twin Peaks for every Copa America match through July the 14th. How will the U.S. fare against our neighbors to the south? Watch every game with those 29-degree draft beers and the wall-to-wall scenic views. And as the NBA season comes to a close, the draft coming up on June 26th and the 27th. You can catch the draft live over at Twin Peaks to see who goes first overall. Tons of action to take in, all with our friends at Twin Peaks right down the street from us here in the Vista. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on this Monday. Like I said, schedule's a little bit weird this week, so we're moving things around to accommodate. Jen Jensen joining me now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Typically do it on Wednesday. We'll do it this morning. Talk a little bit of racing. Fresh, not even 12 hours removed from the end of last night's Iowa Cup Series race. I got to ask first, Jen, were you able to stay up to see the end of that one?
I was actually able to stay up and see the end of it, much to my chagrin this morning when I had to get up for the show. But, yeah, I did stay up, and it was great to see Blaney get that win. You know, he's staffed at a 17-win or winless streak. So it was good to see the last year's champion actually get the win.
Yeah, obviously he was in position to get a win, a couple weeks ago at Gateway until he ran out of gas coming to the white flag, but was finally able to put it together. It's really funny, he led 201 to the 350 laps last night, and they put up the little graphic getting towards the end of the race, so that was the most laps he'd ever led, in a single race. And it reminded me of back when he was chasing his first win, and even after that, he would lead tons of laps in races and dominate races, but always found a way to let a race slip through his fingers. And, that to me, obviously he's got the championship now. He's into double-digit wins in his career. Like, I think that to me is showing the progression and maturity of his career, that now he's not only able to dominate those races, but he's able to back it up and win the race as well. And great to see him get back to victory lane as, the defending champion. You never want to see them go through that slump the year after.
No, and it does seem like it can happen at times. But, no, I was thrilled to see that form. It was a good day for Penske overall. So I'm hoping that this isn't the only one that we're going to see from him in 2024. Remember
just a couple weeks ago how freaked out we were about how bad Fords are running between, Logano winning the All-Star race, Cindric, it did kind of fall into his lap, but he was running well at Gateway, and now Blaney winning here at Iowa. I believe they've figured something out with this dark horse Mustang, where I think we're going to see when Keselowski winning at Darlington as well. I think we're going to see the Fords be a lot more active up front going forward.
It sure seems that way. They had 4 or 5 in the top 10 last night, and yeah, we're definitely seeing better performance from them. And some of it is coming from RFK. I mean, they've really stepped up quite a bit. I mean, now Buescher didn't have a great night last night, but Buescher and Keselowski have been doing great.
And one thing that really stuck out to me last night, this being Iowa's first ever Cup Series race. This is a track that has long been putting on good races in the Truck Series and Xfinity Series. I know it's been a couple years since we've been there because COVID kind of messed everything up for a couple years there. But, there was a lot of concern going into the weekend with the repave in the corners. The tires were an issue on Friday in practice. But I thought we got treated to a pretty darn good race. I wouldn't say it was as good as what we saw at Bristol earlier this year, but you had multiple grooves. You'd have to have tire management. Like, all in all, I'd say I was pretty satisfied with what I saw.
Yeah, I think there was the ability to pass. Things got really racy. I mean, obviously, Kyle Larson kind of put himself in a position that didn't work out so well, but you had the opportunity to drive aggressively, and that was kind of fun to watch and see things like Suarez. He got aggressive out there and did well. Josh Berry was running well and running hard. So I agree with you. I think it was great racing, and I was listening to a program this morning, and there are people who are ready to re-up. That the news was coming out that, yes, we're going to race at Iowa again next year, and they're ready to renew. They said it was a great experience all around.
Well, in a weird way, it kind of is almost a cross between an intermediate and a short track, to where it's obviously 7/8 of a mile, so it qualifies as short track that way. But the speeds that you run, and they were flying around there this weekend, as well as having those multiple grooves, really races a lot like, Kansas and Vegas and Charlotte and some of these other great mile-and-a-halves that we know put on such a good show with the next-gen car. So I think they've really stumbled upon something with that, and I'm glad to see it's going to be coming back next year.
Me too. And I love the fact that they start it when they did, so that you have the daylight and then you have the evening. So that way you're having to make those adjustments as the temperatures get cooler and obviously speeds are going up. So I think that just makes for some extra fun elements in putting on that race.
And just a really passionate crowd. Like you said, it was a sold-out environment last night, and they've long been coming to the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series races, so the support is there. And if they continue to put on good races like that, I think they'll be coming back for many years to come.
Yeah, I agree. We did see a few tire issues. Allmendinger, bless his heart, that's like the second week that he's had tire issues.
Well, and it happened in both races, too.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So, but I guess you expect that. And again, if you're racing hard, obviously that's going to create more tire wear. And I think overall, like I said, it was kind of fun to watch some of the strategies. It's kind of fun to watch Denny Hamlin have some issues, but doggone it if he didn't bounce back. That was tragic.
I was going to say, who won y'all's picks this week?
Sadly, Bill had the top. I had Larson, and obviously that went out. So he had Byron. Yeah. So I was really glad to see Blaney get the win for that reason, too.
Well, and you mentioned Larson, and he might have had an even better car than Blaine. He got wrecked at the start of stage number 3 after getting caught 3 wide there, on the top of Daniel Suarez, and that actually shakes things up for the regular season standings now because Chase Elliott actually moves into the regular season points lead with an 8-point advantage over Kyle Larson. And, Larson's obviously been out there and won the 3 races and even missed the race at Charlotte a couple weeks ago. But, man, Chase Elliott has just been super consistent. One stat they brought up last night that I didn't even realize until they mentioned it. He's finished top 20 in every single race this year. He has been incredibly consistent, has the one win at Texas, but he's getting stage points. He's running the top 5, running the top 10. I don't know if I put him as a championship favorite right now, but he's certainly positioning himself to be a threat for it.
And you know what? What's interesting is that we didn't really realize that stat. And he's just been, like you said, consistent. He's not getting a lot of press. Like, hey, look at Chase Elliott. And, I mean, for him to be top, in third last night. That's fantastic. But it is odd that he hasn't necessarily been on the radar. He's just been quietly, in a stealth-like way, doing his thing, and look where he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's going to be a good battle between him and his teammate Kyle Larson to see who's going to win the regular season standings. Denny Hamlin's not all that far behind, but again, very a rough night for him last night to put him behind the 8 ball a little bit more, but could potentially be a 2-horse race because we get down closer to the end of the regular season. And one more thing to throw out there, this became official on Friday. We kind of knew it was in the works, but I think we even talked about it a little bit on Thursday as well. But Martin Truex Jr. officially announcing his retirement at the end of the season. Does sound like he's going to run some part-time stuff, maybe up to a handful of races next season, but stepping away full-time. And what an interesting career he had, really, for the first 10 years. Not much of note outside of a win here or there, but since he got linked up with Toyota starting in 2016, he's just absolutely been on a tear, championship threat each and every year. And he hasn't had a win yet this season, but still a very good possibility he could be in the mix for that championship as well.
Yep. Well, in New Hampshire, next week might be a good opportunity for him because New Hampshire is strong for him, and he just won that race last year. I'd like to see – I find it interesting that he's made that decision. So clearly he wasn't one looking for a lot of fanfare in going out, because I know we've celebrated a couple others like Harvick last year, the whole big year of everything. So I'm wondering if now some of the NASCAR historians or the teams or whatever are really following him around or to try to chronicle the end of his season. Like, is he interested in that, or is that something the team prefers doing? I find it kind of interesting.
He seems like a very low-profile guy, and I think making an announcement halfway through the year kind of fits his style. And if anything, I think it takes some pressure off of his shoulders, because this is a question we've had really each and every year as we get into the summer and start kind of piecing together what 2025 or the next year is going to look like. It's like, is Martin Truex Jr. going to stay, or is he going to retire? But now we officially know he's going to retire, and now the big question becomes of who's going to replace him in the 19 car, which there's an interesting list of candidates.
Yeah, and I thought that Eric Jones was kind of in the top of the list to be replacing him, but I guess I need to double-check that.
Yeah, I've heard Chase Briscoe. I think Jones is certainly in the mix. There's no overwhelming favorite as of right now, and it really kind of boils down to, if Bass Pro Shop stays on, what the sponsorship situation looks like, and who might be able to bring their own sponsor over. But regardless, whoever gets in there is getting into a very good and very capable car.
Yep. I totally agree, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that team, and I'm also looking forward to seeing Truex come back a little bit. He said that he's had his schedule planned out for him for so long. He hasn't missed a practice, hasn't missed a race, and now he's like, I kind of want to make my own schedule, so I think it's going to be fun to see what he does, and I'm sure there's a lot of fishing that'll be involved.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, well-deserved retirement for him. Going to be excited to see what he's going to do in the last half of his final full season, and heading to his home racetrack in New Hampshire this weekend to see if he can't go back-to-back like he did a season ago. And we'll touch base again next week to talk about New Hampshire and look ahead to the big one for you, the Chicago Street Race, coming up very, very soon as well.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it. Got my wristbands. We're ready to go.
All right, very cool. Jen Jensen joining me. She does each and every week, talking a little bit of racing, and we'll touch base with her again next week. Appreciate it as always, Jen.
Thanks, Tyler.
Coming up next, College Football Hall of Fame is stirring up controversy. One particular name not allowed to be on the ballot. With that coming up, it's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday on the Game. Looking at my weather app on my phone here, and fortunately, it does not look like we have any rain in the near future here in Columbia. But as we get deeper and deeper into summer, those afternoon thunderstorms are going to be on the docket very, very soon. And if you have an open crawl space under your home and recently experienced a storm, you might have some standing water under there. High humidity and condensation in your crawl space creates an environment for mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites. That moisture can lead to things like wood rot and floor joist problems as well. Musty smells and awful odors can come from mold and mildew in your crawl space that may cause health issues such as runny nose, itchy eyes, or coughs, because up to half the air that you breathe in your home comes from your crawl space. Any issues with your crawl space, you need to check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. Again, Canty Foundation Specialist online for an appointment at cantycanfixit.com. We'll get back in. Here's the extra point. Tyler Head with you on this Monday. Here's our Talking Hardwood segment brought to you by our friends over at Georgia Pacific. And for this segment, I want to talk about the College Football Hall of Fame located in Atlanta. I've been. Fun place, very interactive, a lot of cool features and stuff that, immerse you in the game of college football. You can see, the Heisman Trophy. You can see all kinds of memorabilia and things from the history of the game. Really, really great place. And you get to the end of it, and there's the, I don't know how to describe it, the room where you can see all the people that have been enshrined in the College Football Hall of Fame, and it's interactive. You can like click on the names. It brings up their career accolades and all that kind of stuff. Very, very cool. And every year, a new ballot is released for the College Football Hall of Fame to see who's going to be elected in the, next year's cycle. And look, the College Football Hall of Fame has a illustrious list of names that have the opportunity to be, be included on it. And just kind of skimming through the list of some of the people that are going to be allowed to be on the list. This year you got, let's see, Aaron Donald from his time at Pittsburgh, Willie Gault from Tennessee back in the day, Graham Harrell when he played quarterback at Texas Tech, Marvin Harrison, Mark Ingram, Ryan Leaf, tons of great players, coaches as well that have the opportunity to potentially be enshrined in the next class of the College Football Hall of Fame. Urban Meyer's on the ballot, Nick Saban, Tommy Tuberville. So a lot of great names there, but one name that is being omitted from the College Football Hall of Fame, or just not even being omitted, not being allowed to be on the docket at all, is Mike Leach. And this has stirred up quite a bit of controversy here as of late. I want to let you listen to Andy Staples of On3 tell you why exactly Mike Leach is not allowed to be on the College Football Hall of Fame ballot. Cut number one.
There is one coach who's not on the ballot. We need to talk about that. There is no Pirate presence on the ballot. Mike Leach is not on the ballot, and here's why. The criteria call for a coach, you have to have been a head coach for 10 years. You have to have won at least 100 career games. And you have to have a 600 all-time winning percentage. That's the reason he's not on the ballot. He has a 596 all-time winning percentage. But here's where I will push back on that. Mike Leach coached at schools where it was traditionally, historically, very difficult to win. The reason his winning percentage is not super high is because he wasn't at a powerhouse school. Like, Alabama was pretty good before Nick Saban showed up. Now, Mike Shula didn't have a bunch of great years, but like 2 years before Nick Saban was hired, Alabama was in a BCS bowl. Alabama's a double-digit win team.
And there's a lot of people talking about this because, yes, by the letter of the law, Mike Leach is under the mark of a 600 winning percentage, in his college football career, as Andy Staples mentioned right there, at 596. That means he was just 3 wins shy. If he had coached 3 more games and won all of them, he would have been at 600, at that 600 mark that would have given him enough to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. And look, I understand you do have to draw a line in the sand somewhere because you don't want to just be open to anybody and everybody. But at the same time, I feel like you can make exceptions to the rule based on impact, which is something that is a part of their criteria. It's, what you did on the field or when it came to coaching. It's how you are in the community and overall what you've done for the game of football. And when it comes to Mike Leach, and this was echoed by Lincoln Riley, Bob Stutz, as well as many others, again, there's a lot of conversation going about him as of late, is what he meant to college football, particularly when it comes to offense. As, being that innovator and revolutionizer of the air raid system that has changed the way college football is played on so many fronts. And, he just looked at the game a completely different way. And again, you see traces of Mike Leach and so much of what college football is. The impact that he had on the game really can't be understated. Shouldn't be understated. Excuse me. And that's the reason why a lot of people are pushing him for to be in the College Football Hall of Fame because of the impact that he had on the game. And, it's kind of one of those things. If you get a large enough mob of people to push something in one direction, does that make a change? I don't know. I certainly, I think he deserves to be in. And again, many other people do, because he checks every other box. It's just that 0.004 knock on his winning percentage that is keeping him out as of right now. And again, I don't think that they should completely abolish that standard. I do think it's a good, area to be around. But I feel like there are certain things within your coaching history and within your track record that should be able to supersede that one criteria if that's the one thing that's keeping you out of the College Football Hall of Fame. And again, I think Coach Leach falls perfectly, perfectly within that realm. And look, the eligibility requirements of the College Football Hall of Fame aren't something that we probably give a whole lot of thought to. I think we all just kind of look at the ballot when it comes out every year and like, oh, hey, that guy's finally on it. Hey, he deserves to be in, whatever it may be. But in researching this Coach Leach thing, it did lead me down to kind of an interesting rabbit hole in terms of players that are actually not eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame. And some of these names you might not believe. Now, for a player, they must have received first-team All-American honors recognized by a selector, recognized by the NCAA, and utilized to comprise their consensus All-American teams. Now, this has shifted over the years, where some years they recognize some consensus All-Americans, other years they don't recognize others, and it would take too much time to go through the history of what has and hasn't been recognized on a year-by-year basis by the NCAA. So here's some names that, as of right now, cannot go to the College Football Hall of Fame. Julio Jones, who's undoubtedly going to go to the NFL Hall of Fame. Eli Manning. Nick Chubb, who's top 5 in rush yards in a career in the SEC history. Will Reichert, who's the NCAA's all-time scoring leader from his time kicking at Alabama. And Trevor Lawrence. It's like if these guys can't be included in the Hall of Fame, then what's the value of the Hall of Fame? If some of the greatest players in their respective conference and all of college football, can't be in because of these silly rules. You know what I mean? Something has to change, right? Like, I feel like there's so much push against what the current standards are that they may relax them a little bit, but there are certainly tons. And again, that's just scratching the surface on names that aren't eligible for the Hall of Fame based on that criteria. But, if you're going to have the Hall of Fame, be the best representation of what college football is, I don't think you can omit some of these names that are being left out because of the impact that they had on the game of college football. So personally, I hope they relax it a little bit. That would be, my hope. Does that happen? I don't know. Not everybody is swayed by the court of public opinion, but it certainly is a shame if Mike Leach never gets the opportunity to be enshrined in the College Football Hall of Fame for the impact that he did have on the game of college football that's still being felt today and will always be felt for many, many years going forward. Well, we'll wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Snoop Dogg found his way into the commentary booth for some Major League Baseball, and it is definitely worth listening to. We'll hit that coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday on the Game.
came in where the players come in at. Because I'm a player. Get up in there. Oh, he's saying if he can't throw that, he ain't got no arm like that. No, he don't.
He does, though.
No, he don't.
Oh, he does.
Who is that with that rocket?
Ellie De La Cruz.
Oh, Lord.
With a howitzer.
He got a rocket in his pocket. Oh, he made that.
Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Monday. Snoop Dogg never, ever disappoints. And if you told me he was going to commentate an entire Major League Baseball game, I would definitely tune in for that. He made his way up into the booth for the Reds and the Brewers game over the weekend. That's just one of his calls of Ellie De La Cruz throwing out a runner at first base with a very impressive throw. But, it's funny. Preston and I, the other week on the early game when I was filling in for Bill, we talked about Snoop Dogg quite a bit because Preston's doing his 100 Days to Kick Off 100 Albums countdown, and Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style album was the album of the day a couple weeks ago. So we spent a good deal of time, talking about him, and it's funny because my experiences with Snoop Dogg are far different than his when it comes to what he was and what I understood him to be kind of growing up, because when I was a kid, I was born in 96, he was already well established in the music realm. He was already doing other things outside of music as I was becoming aware of him. So I never really have thought of him as like the music first type of thing, because he's an actor, he's a host, he's a presenter, he's got his own podcast, he's on game shows, he does all kinds of things that almost make you think that he just kind of lives maybe the funnest life out of everyone, because he just shows up and does the most random things, to the point where if Snoop Dogg showed up in an event, no matter what the event is, if he showed up at the Puppy Bowl next year or something like that, like you'd be like, yeah, I could see that. Like, because he's just he does whatever. And it's so cool. And he's got his own flair and personality, and fun to hear him calling some baseball. And I'd probably pay a fair amount of money to hear him commentate a lot of different sports, but a good little thing there from over the weekend. Speaking of over the weekend, college baseball out in Omaha, as we are whittling down teams to decide who's going to be the national champion for the 2024 college baseball season. And boy, it was a day of walk-offs on Friday. We'll start off with here, cut number 4, Ed.
And that one is ripped. That's the game. Honeycutt does it again. And they turn Chapel Thrill into Charles Schwakoff Stadium.
UNC with the walk-off over Virginia to get things started on Friday afternoon. That put Virginia into elimination game yesterday, taking on Florida State, where they fell 7-3. So the Cavaliers getting bounced from Omaha, which that means that South Carolina's new third assistant coach, and Joe Hendry, will be able to join the team here in Columbia. I'm assuming this week. Don't know all the details about that just yet. But we knew he was going to be out there tied up in Omaha for the next couple days, and wouldn't be able to join South Carolina until that was all said and done. So now the Cavaliers are leaving Nebraska. He, again, should be able to join South Carolina very, very soon. And again, that's how things got started on Friday, but it would be another walk-off later that evening, cut number 3 here, Ed, that ended up being the nightcap on Friday.
The 1-0 in the air, left center field. Ross on the move, won't get there. Tennessee walks it off.
It was really easy to pick Tennessee as the favorite going into the College World Series. Number 1 team overall, offensive numbers amazing. Obviously, they pitch really, really well, but they found themselves in a hole in game number 1, taking on Florida State on Friday to the point where they were actually down 11-7 going into the 8th inning. Put 1 run aboard in the 8th, and then just had a monster 9th inning, scoring 4 runs there that included that walk-off, to be able to complete the comeback and pick up that victory against Florida State to send them to the elimination game, where, again, they ended up beating UVA yesterday to formally eliminate them. Kentucky picks up its first win in its College World Series tenure on Saturday. A&M beats Florida as well, which sets up the second set of games for those 4 teams coming up tonight, where Florida and NC State will face each other in an elimination game after Kentucky beat NC State on Saturday, and then Texas A&M and Kentucky will face each other on the winner side of things. First pitch coming up for that tonight at 7 o'clock, as again, Florida State or NC State will join Virginia as the first 2 teams eliminated from the College World Series. Then coming up tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, Florida State and North Carolina will face each other in another elimination game as things dwindle down to the single elimination format as the week goes along. So again, a lot of excitement out there in Omaha, a place that South Carolina certainly hopes it can get back to in the very near future. But we'll see. We'll see how things shake out as the week goes along out there to decide to the 2024 national champion. I want to jump into college football coming up in the next segment. A lot, and forgive me, Kentucky also had a walk-off this weekend as well. That happened against NC State. So a lot of walk-offs out there in Omaha. Want to jump into college football in the next hour. Really dive into who are going to be the contenders for the college football playoff, because it might be a few more names than you think. Some actually surprised me. We'll dive into all that coming up in hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass for Captain Dave today. Tyler Head along with you on this Monday here on The Game. Tyler Head for Canty Foundation Specialist. I told you a little bit earlier about what Canty can do for water under your home, in your crawl space. They can also just fix up regular foundation problems as well. If you notice things around your home that are a little bit peculiar, maybe things like cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be a little bit sticky, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you have any of these problems, they could be serious foundation issues with your home. If so, you need to check out our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Go online to cantycanfixit.com and schedule an appointment with a professional that will come out to your home, evaluate your home's foundation, and let you know what you need to do to fix it up so you and your family can live comfortably going forward. Again, Canty Foundation Specialist. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. Welcome back in. Hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head here with you on this Monday. Reminder, as always, you can check us out on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. Just go to youtube.com, search the Game TV, and watch us all day long here in our studio. I was thinking about this over the weekend, as you know, like I said in the last hour, we've talked all we can talk about. It seems like when it comes to college baseball, when it comes to South Carolina's head coaching search. Now that Paul Maneri's here, the College World Series is going to be wrapping up here before the end of the month, and that'll officially put a bow on the 2023-2024 college sports calendar. And then we enter that lull of a period, through July and August, waiting for college football to start, to really jumpstart the new calendar year when it comes to college sports. Now, yes, in the meantime, we're going to have media days. Camp's going to be starting in August. So there's going to be things to get us through to that point, but we're not going to see any more college sports taking place, live that is, until August rolls around, the end of August, because of, the way the calendar falls this year. And, thinking ahead to this college football season, there's so much mystery. And we all love a good mystery, right? I think we all grew up watching Scooby-Doo and the Gang, trying to figure out who the ghost was that didn't want the people to buy the mansion so they could, build an amusement park or something like that. I don't know. And it was always some old guy in a mask that was trying to scare everybody off, and they would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids and their dumb dog. We know the story, right? But mystery creates so much intrigue as you venture into the unknown. And I truly think more than ever, this college football season is the greatest unknown this sport has ever seen. And so much of that stems from the college football playoff. Now, yeah, you have a realignment, and you have some, different rules and stuff like that, but nothing is creating more intrigue in my mind than what we're going to experience with how the, championship format is going to work and how our champion is going to be decided. It's never been this deep, and it's never been this, I don't want to say complicated, but fleshed out as it's going to be this upcoming year. Because when you think about it, in the history of college football, the shifts from one format of deciding to champion to another have been gradual, right? It's been one step here, one step there, one step here, one step there. We've never taken a seismic jump, because you go back to, for decades and decades and decades, it was all determined based on polls. So you get at the end of the season, you look at the polls and say, all right, well, these polls selected this national champion, these polls selected this national champion, and that is what it is. Now, whether that was right or wrong, that's up to your opinion, but that's how it was done for a very long time. And then it got to the point where they were trying to do within their power to match up 1 and 2 for a true national championship game. That didn't happen every single year. Rose Bowl threw a lot of wrenches in the mix with that one, but they were at least trying, and that was late 80s when they really started to push that, and that eventually got us into the 90s with the BCS, where again it was a little bit more streamlined, where all right, you have these computers that are going to spit out a number, and the two teams with the best number are going to play each other for the national championship. So we really hadn't strayed all that far off the original course. And then as you got into the original college football playoff with 4 teams, we call it a playoff. It was really a +1 system. It really wasn't that much of a jump. Now, yes, you went from a computers to having a committee decide who was going to be in the top 4, but regardless, that didn't make all that big of a difference. And now instead of, the 2 teams being told in early December, hey, a month from now you're going to play for a national championship, you get 4 teams that play each other on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and the 2 winners of that go on to the national championship game. So it wasn't really that big of a jump. But like I said, when you look at what this 12-team format is going to be, it's really a seismic shift in how it's done. Because now we're going to have first-round buys. Now we're going to have games on campus. Now we're going to have 2 sets of bowl games used just to get to the national championship. So you might have to win the Rose Bowl and the Cotton Bowl before ever going to the national championship game. Like, that's something we're going to have to get used to, and sounds kind of weird saying, but it's what this new reality of college football is going to be. And when you look at the amount of teams that are going to be let in, it opens up the field to many, many more contenders. Because let's be honest here, let's go out back to the 4-team college football playoff. In the best years, going into the season, I think most people would realistically say that was probably no more than 10 teams that really you thought had a shot at the national championship. Now, sure, teams do come out of nowhere and have surprising seasons and all that kind of stuff, but realistically speaking, it was the same kind of cluster of teams that were that were in the mix for the national championship, and it didn't really open it up past that. But now it's wide open. Now you have the opportunity for tons and tons of teams to make their first playoff, to potentially cause disruptions. And, is that good for the sport? I don't know yet. And that's been the long debate when it's come to the new college football playoff is, what does that do to the regular season? Because the great thing about college football forever has been the value of what the regular season, has been. And again, I go back to the AP poll era, even the BCS era, where you pretty much had to be undefeated or only have one loss. And that one loss better be to a good opponent if you want any shot of claiming a national championship. And, let's go back to, a handful of years ago when you lost that second game, that was it. Unless you were LSU back in 2007, who managed to lose 2 games in the regular season, including a chaotic, 3 overtime game against Arkansas in the last game of the regular season. I mean, people thought they were done, but winning the SEC championship the next week was enough to catapult them back into the BCS national championship game, which they did win. That is very much the exception, not the rule. More often than not, if you had 2 losses, in fact, I can't recall in the BCS era, we certainly know it didn't happen in the college football playoff era, another 2-loss team playing for a national championship. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think it ever happened outside of LSU back in 2007 in those respective BCS or college football playoff eras. So again, you had to be as close to perfect as possible if you wanted to pursue the national championship. And that in turn did make the regular season very valuable because you might only get one mulligan, and winning and losing mattered a whole lot. So when people gripe about what the new college football playoff is going to be, the first thing they bring up is it devaluing the regular season. And that is true, but at the same time, it also makes the regular season more important than ever because of the amount of contenders that it's going to open up. And again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just kind of laying things out the way that I see it, because let's think about the month of October, right? As you get halfway through the month, you're roughly halfway through the season, you've eliminated a vast majority of teams from contention in the college football playoff. 2-loss teams, certainly 3-loss teams at that point in time, they don't stand a chance because you had to be in one of those lucrative top 4 spots. It didn't matter what you did in your conference championship. If you weren't in one of those coveted top 4 spots, you weren't going to make it in to the college football playoff. Well, that kind of goes out the window now, where, yes, you're still going to get a lot of teams in that are undefeated or 1-loss teams, but the possibility is open for teams with a lot more losses to get in. As I've said before, I think 10-2 in the SEC or the Big Ten, that probably gets you in. Maybe even 9-3. We'll have to see. A lot of these other conferences, 1 loss, that's going to get you in. Obviously, winning your conference championship, that's going to get you in. So what that does in turn, again, I use the example of like mid-October. Let's go into late November, where things really get down to crunch time in the nitty-gritty, where most years in the 14 playoff era, we're talking about maybe 6 or 7 teams at that point in time, still with a realistic shot. Well, why not triple that? Because you're not only going to have the teams that are currently ranked in the top 11, you're going to have the teams, 12th through probably I mean, being realistic, maybe even all teams in the top 25, you could say have a chance at that point in time. Not to mention the teams that could win their conference championships without actually being ranked, because that can happen too. And you can be an unranked team, win your conference championship, and automatically punch your ticket. Depending on how things shake out, determines if you be in one of those top 4 spots or not. But you get my point. Like, this opens up the door to a lot of different possibilities. And with the talent being spread out a little bit more, and it's not even across the board, we all know that. But with the advent of the transfer portal, and a lot of good talent that would have normally stayed 3 to 4 years at an Ohio State or an Alabama or Georgia, well, now those guys that are second and third stringers, they're going elsewhere. And being at Georgia or Ohio State or Alabama, they're probably pretty good players. And now that talent gets to go out everywhere else. So we're going to see it, the parity, I think, spread out a little bit more. I think we're already seeing that to a degree, if we're being honest. And in turn, that creates a lot more intrigue when it comes to the college football playoff. Now, again, I'm not saying you have to like this. If you are a traditionalist and you love the fact that you had to be undefeated or only have one loss to have any shot of the national championship going in the month of November, that is perfectly fine, and I completely get that. I understand that, and I'm traditional in a lot of ways too, but I can't lie to you and say that I'm not excited about the potential for what this 12-team playoff could be, because it opens up so many doors, so many avenues, and again, is that grand mystery. It's the unknown. It's what we don't know that creates the most intrigue to me, to see how it all shakes out, to see what teams are going to make it in, to see the criteria. Because we got a pretty good gauge of what the criteria was for the college football playoff. Now, again, that kind of went out the door at the last second when they left Florida State out of the freaking thing this past year. But just kind of seeing where the lines are, seeing what the standard is, seeing what the expectation of making it to the playoff is for teams, because we don't know any of that right now. All we know is if you win your conference championship, you get in a power conference at least, and you get a bye more likely than not. And a group of 5 team gets in. Everything else, wide open to at-large teams. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this shakes out and who ends up being contenders and who doesn't. And in line with that, I spent a lot of time this weekend really diving in to all the teams across power conferences to really see at this point in time, and again, we're 70 some odd days away from kicking the season off, who are we comfortable with saying are definitely contenders as of right now? It's a pretty long list. We'll get into that coming up, start with, at least, in the SEC and the Big Ten. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point Tyler Head with you on this Monday morning. Talking all things college football playoff, deciding which teams are contenders as we go into the season. Now, as I present this list of teams, again, there's going to be teams that come out of nowhere. There's going to be teams that aren't on anybody's radar that are going to have good seasons that we say, wow, I didn't see that coming. That's just the natural progression of college football. Happens each and every year. The list I'm looking at now is what I feel like is, I guess, bona fide contenders. Ones you don't really have to question a whole lot, that you just know are going to be in the mix. And you know, it really highlights just how many teams with this expanded playoff where it's tripling in size, going from 4 to 8 overnight, how much more this opens up college football and, you know, really opens the door for teams to play meaningful football in terms of a national championship pursuit into the month of November. Now, we obviously have to start off with the SEC and the Big Ten. They're the two big dogs. They have dominated the college football playoff era when it comes to national championships, with the exception of the couple that were won by, you know, by Clemson, obviously. But I mean, this has really been the, you know, SEC and Big Ten show. In the 10 years of the 4-team college football playoff, out of the 40 available slots, those two conferences have occupied half of them, 21 of the 40 spots, or over half of them, excuse me, in that time period. So I don't expect much to change. Again, we know the conference champions are going to get in. They'll get those, you know, one of those top 4 seeds. And then I feel like most of the at-large spots probably going to go to teams in the SEC and the Big Ten as well. So when you look down the SEC, who are the definitive contenders for the college football playoff? I think Georgia goes without saying. Won 2 out of past 3 national championships, still very loaded on all fronts with talent. A team that, had they got into the playoff last year, whether, you know, by winning the SEC against Alabama or still getting in despite the one loss, I think there's a realistic chance they could have won the whole thing. I mean, they're that deep, they're that loaded, they're that good. I mean, it really kind of is almost cliche at this point when you talk about Georgia. We know how good they are. And in a 12-team playoff, I mean, that's a team that if they keep playing at this high level, should never miss this playoff, if we're being completely honest. So Georgia, I mean, they're definitively going to be one of the favorites this year. Texas, who should be around as good as last year, obviously made the college football playoff for the first time in their final year in the Big 12. Now the question is, can they come into the SEC and do the same thing? You're bringing back Quinn Ewers, who is, I mean, he's probably going to be the best odds for the Heisman Trophy once we get to the beginning of the season. No surprise there. Do have to replace some, you know, notable talent like, you know, Xavier Worthy, but you add Isaiah Bond, Amari Niblack, guys like that out of the transfer portal, both those guys from Alabama, funny enough. And the defense should be pretty good this year as well. And I was kind of looking at it. Their schedule's not all that daunting. I mean, look, there's no easy schedules in the SEC. They do have to play Georgia. They do have to go on the road to Texas A&M and Kyle Field at the end of the season. But outside of that, I feel like this is a kind of a manageable schedule. Do I expect them to go undefeated? No. But I'd be hard-pressed to say they couldn't pull off 10-2 with the schedule at worst, you know, that they have. I guess it'll be a true indication of how back Texas is if they're able to make the college football playoff 2 years in a row. Alabama, I think they can just get the benefit of the doubt. You know, we'll see how good of a coach Kalen DeBoer is, but they've been there and done that so many times. I don't think you can sit here and say, no, Alabama's not going to be a factor, because we just don't know yet. That's another thing that creates intrigue, is just not knowing when it comes to a team like Alabama. You know, Tennessee, outside of the Bama and the Georgia games, I think their schedule is pretty manageable. Now, their big thing is the great unknown when it comes to starting a freshman quarterback, redshirt freshman quarterback, like we're getting ready to do with Lenore Sellers here. Nico has garnered so much hype in his career up to this point. Can he live up to it is the big question. Again, 2 tough games in Bama and Georgia on the schedule, but everything past that I feel like is not insane. And again, they may be the team that may not be going to Atlanta, but could very well find themselves represented in the college football playoff in a 12-team field. And Ole Miss, a team that I'm already penciling in, I'm not afraid to say that, still 70-some odd days away from the season kicking off. But, man, they came off the greatest season in school history, 11 wins. 11 wins a season ago. They have killed it in the transfer portal. Well documented. Got Juice Wells, one of the notable guys out of the portal for them. Jackson Dart returns as one of the most experienced quarterbacks in all of the SEC. Like, this has the makings for an even more special year for Ole Miss. And, again, you don't even have to go undefeated. 11-1, 10-2, I think you're good. And Ole Miss, while it wouldn't shock me if they got to Atlanta, but even if they don't, I think that's a team that you can probably comfortably say is going to be right there, when those final rankings come out, likely in position to make the college football playoff. So that's 5 teams definitively in the SEC that I think are serious contenders. And again, could a Missouri and an LSU have great seasons? Absolutely. And then you're opening up to 7. But if you just had me pick right now, those are the 5 teams that I can definitively say I think are in the mix for the for the college football playoff outside the SEC. We go to the Big Ten. Usual suspects, of course. Ohio State, duh. Here's the thing: you don't have to beat Michigan this time. If we're really thinking about it, you could lose the Michigan game, be 11-1, and still get in, which they did a couple seasons ago. They hit the portal pretty well. One of the better ranked portal classes. You're bringing in a lot more experience at multiple positions. They got Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss. Like, this team's loaded and should be very good. On the flip side of things, Michigan, defending national champions, if I left them out of this list, I feel like everybody would be okay with that just because they are really going back to the drawing board in a lot of ways. Not just with talent. Yeah, you lost McCarthy, you lost Corum, but with the coach, one of the best minds in all of football these days, Jim Harbaugh, is gone. Gone back to the NFL, pursuing that Super Bowl that has eluded him so far in his career. We don't know what Sharon Moore is as a head coach. We saw him in an interim role a season ago and did fine. They won those games, obviously. We'll see how good he is over the course of a full season. And yes, I sound skeptical, but Michigan, I feel like, though, for how good they've been these past handful of years, I do think we have to give them the benefit of the doubt until they show you otherwise at this point in time, which I think is fair. Oregon comes in as a new team from the Pac-12, the old Pac-12. ESPN's FPI has them with the highest projected win total going in. They are top 10 in portal recruiting, which was highlighted by Dylan Gabriel coming over from Oklahoma for his final year. They grabbed Texas A&M's former 5-star wide receiver in Evan Stewart. And Dan Lanning's a defensive-minded coach. Big Ten, tough, physical defensive league. I think Oregon's got a very good shot at coming here and making noise very quickly. I mean, we could have an Ohio State-Oregon Big Ten championship game, which sounds just bizarre to say out loud, but it's a new reality we got used to, right? Things are always changing. This is the big one. But Oregon, much like Texas, I think has a very good opportunity to come in and make an immediate impact in its new conference. And then Penn State. Penn State, the 12-team playoff is a dream for a James Franklin Penn State team because they've not been able to beat Michigan. They've not been able to beat Ohio State. They've always just been that third team in the Big Ten for the most part in Franklin's tenure. Even the one year they did win the Big Ten, they weren't good enough to make it in the college football playoff because they already had 2 losses. So even if you can't still get over that hump of beating those teams, again, 10-2 might be good enough to get you in there. Drew Aller had a underwhelming first season up there in Happy Valley. He's been working on his downfield passing this offseason. They hired Andy Koltanicki, the offensive coordinator from Kansas, who had the Jayhawks 24th in explosive pass plays down the field a season ago. So the perfect kind of guy to work with Drew Aller. Defense was best in the nation in sacks. You did lose Manny Diaz to the Miami job. Or you did lose Manny Diaz to the Duke job. But you bring in Tom Allen, a defensive-minded coach from Indiana after he got fired there. But they'll have to rebuild the defense at all levels. But, again, just being the average Penn State they've been these past couple of years should be enough to get them in to the college football playoff in a 12-team format. So that's 9 teams between the SEC and the Big Ten alone. That almost fills out the entire field. And we're only through 2 of the 4 power conferences. We'll take a look at the ACC and the Big 12 next. These are the 2 wild card conferences. This is where things really start to open up a little bit more with the possibilities of teams that could end up getting in. So we'll dive into some of those names coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday on the Game. Oh, we're talking about the college football playoff here on the Extra Point, the new 12-team format that is, and how many new teams this opens it up for, with this expanded field. The ACC and the Big 12 are so intriguing because they just seem so wide open. Like there's more questions than answers with a lot of these teams, it feels like, to see who's going to represent their respective conferences. Now, again, we know the SEC and the Big Ten, they're going to get at-large teams in. They may make up the majority of the at-large teams in. ACC and the Big 12, maybe one per conference. I don't know. I can't definitively sit here and tell you that I think they're going to have a large majority of at-large teams, which, again, makes the chase for the conference championship that much more intriguing, because all you got to do is win that and you're in. And that could go to really anybody. I mean, you look at Florida State, who, of course, got snubbed last year. Won't happen this year. If they're undefeated ACC champions, they're getting in regardless. Jordan Travis has gone to the NFL. DJU, you may have forgotten about that. DJU making his return to the ACC by taking over the reins at Florida State. You know, when you look at his numbers at his last year at Clemson compared to Oregon State a season ago, very similar. But if you just watch him play, he looked a lot more comfortable, looked a lot more developed out there at Oregon State. We'll see how that translates coming back to the ACC this time around and see if he can be even better. Defense last year was a strong point for them. Even after they lost Jordan Travis, that defense kept them in those last couple games, that slog of a boring ACC championship game. They won 16-6 against Louisville. Now, they lose two of their key guys in Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk, but they've worked the portal very well. Got a very experienced secondary that returns most of their starters. That was one of the best in all of college football, last year. So defense looks to be another strong point for Florida State this upcoming season to see if they can replicate the success. And Mike Norvell, who, again, has really built that program back up after Jimbo Fisher let it down, should have that team in contention once again. Louisville, again, the team they played in the ACC championship game a year ago, they were in contention for the college football playoff until they lost that game to Louisville at the end of last year. They bring in the number 2 class out of the transfer portal this past season. Tyler Schall takes over at quarterback, coming over from Texas Tech. And if he can stay healthy, he can put up pretty good numbers. I believe this is going to be his 7th year of college football, so very experienced guy. Again, just not had the best luck when it's come to injuries. Their toughest games, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Kentucky. We'll see how they fare in those. But again, it's really just about chasing that ACC championship game and potentially being back in that mix again. Their defense is headlined by Ashton Gillott and Mason Reiger, who combined for 16 sacks a season ago. Both those guys playing up front on that defensive line. Should be good with their pass rush once again this season. And again, we'll see if they can replicate the success they had a season ago. Miami's intriguing. Year number 3 at Oregon is where Mario Cristobal really took off. And he took that Oregon team to the Rose Bowl. Is that going to be the same deal at Miami? Now, I think they got one of the best portal pickups out of anybody this offseason, that being Cam Ward at quarterback, coming over from Washington State. He's a guy that could have gone to the NFL if he wanted to, but decided to come back to college football. And I really think it's going to elevate this Miami offense to a different level. Defense is fine, but I really think Cam Ward is just that dynamic type of playmaker that can really be the difference for Miami to step up in year number 3 under Mario Cristobal. You got to include Clemson, right? I mean, last year was a step in the wrong direction for them, but they're a team that's perennially been at the top of the ACC and could take that step back up again this year. How is Cade Klubnik going to step up in his second full year as a starter? We will see. We obviously know they haven't hit the transfer portal because that's not Dabo Swinney's thing. We know the defense is going to be good. And in a conference like the ACC, having good defense, even if your offense is a little can still keep you in contention. Now, obviously, our hope here locally is that that's not the case, but I don't think anybody would be shocked at all if Clemson steps back up as in contention with the ACC once again. And then NC State. NC State, what a year for them on all sports. Bowl game, 2 Final Four teams, and making it to the College World Series. I mean, that's about as good as years you can get for most schools around the country. That football team a year ago quietly had 9 wins. Nobody talked about them. What Dave Doran's doing up there is very solid. They're bringing Grayson McCall at quarterback after just throwing the rock all over the yard in his time at Coastal Carolina. And he's a winner if he stays healthy, which plagued him a little bit at the end of last season. They bring back Kevin Concepcion at wide receiver, who they use at wide receiver and running backs. Very dynamic when it comes to that. They had the most interceptions in the ACC a season ago. Return a couple guys in the secondary. They are having to replace their award-winning linebacker in Peyton Wilson in the middle of their defense, but should be a solid defense once again. The real litmus test for them is going to be week number 2 against Tennessee. That's going to really tell us how good or bad NC State is. But again, that's a team that I think has a good shot at contending when it comes to the ACC. And then you get to the Big 12, and you want to talk about wide open. This is as wide open as it could possibly get. You lose your 2 top dogs in Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. And I know that Oklahoma State made the Big 12 championship game a season ago, but Oklahoma was definitively the second best team in the Big 12. They just happened to lose Bedlam, the final edition of Bedlam, that is, to Oklahoma State. As I brought up earlier, you don't have to be in the top 12 to make the college football playoff. You can be a team outside of that if you win your conference. Case in point, Kansas State was outside the top 12 a couple years ago, and they beat TCU in the conference championship game. If you remove Texas and Oklahoma from the Big 12 season ago, a 6-6 Iowa team would have been in the Big 12 championship game. Like, that's how wide open and chaotic this conference is. You obviously have to talk about Oklahoma State, who is kind of positioning themselves to be top dog. Now, they got to avoid losing those winnable games like they do every single year. You get Alan Bowman back at quarterback. You get Ollie Gordon, who very well may be the best running back in all of college football back after running for 1,700 yards a season ago. And again, you lose Texas and Oklahoma to theoretically clear the way a little bit. Arizona was kind of the story of college football a season ago. Now, Jed Fish has gone to Washington, but you get Noah Fafita back as quarterback as he set the world on fire in the Pac-12 season ago. You get back their leading wide receiver in I'm going to screw this name up, Tedioria McMillan, and they're retooling on defense, but that offense is high-powered enough the Big 12 has not always been known to play the best defense, where just having good enough offense should be able to make you a contender in a conference like the Big 12. Another team coming over from the Pac-12, Utah, with Cam Rising, if he can stay healthy, back for his 12th year of college football. Also gets back his favorite target and tight end, Brett Kuth, who was good with him a couple seasons ago. Dorian Singer, who was an 1,100-yard receiver at Southern Cal at Arizona a couple seasons ago, transfers over from Southern Cal. Like, a lot of good things on offense there, and we know the defense of Utah is always nasty and always down for a rock fight. And I think they have the ability to really grab the bull by the horns in their first year in the Big 12. Kansas, Lance Leipold, remarkable turnaround. They get Jalen Daniels back, who, despite losing him earlier on last season, they still won 9 games. And Devin Neal, their running back, might be the second best running back behind Ollie Gordon in the Big 12. So plenty of reason to be excited about them. And then you can't leave out Central Florida. Gus Malzahn is a coach that knows how to win. And he brings in KJ Jefferson to run, I imagine, a Cam Newton style of offense, or have a Cam Newton type of effect on Central Florida, like Malzahn had with him back at Auburn all those years ago. That's a team that not a lot of people are maybe paying attention to that I really think can jump up and be a serious threat. So again, Big 12 wide open. ACC seems to be wide open as well. And again, it just adds to the list of names that could potentially be in the mix for the college football playoff conservatively as of right now. And again, there's going to be names out there that we aren't even thinking as of right now. I haven't even gotten to the group of 5 because that's still wide open. But out of the Power 4 conferences, those are just a few of the names that you can comfortably say as of right now are in contention for the college football playoff. I'll take a look at the group of 5 as well as Notre Dame. Can't leave them out as well as a wrap-up hour number 2 of the Extra Point coming up next here on the game. Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on the game as we continue our examination of contenders for the 2024 inaugural 12-team college football playoff ran through the 4 power conferences, but it's not just the power conferences anymore. We do throw a bone to the group of 5, but before we get to that, you can't forget about Notre Dame. Notre Dame exists in that weird purgatory that is being an FBS independent while also being treated like a Power 5 program. They had their own rule in place with the 14-team college football playoff. Now, as it stands, they can't be a team to get a first-round bye because they don't belong to a respective conference, but still very much going to be in the mix when it comes to the college football playoff. They fell off a little bit as the season went along last year, but year number 3 for Marcus Freeman. We'll see how good of a coach he is and if he can take that step forward of getting this program to where Brian Kelly had them for so many years. They're bringing Riley Leonard from Duke to replace Sam Hartman. They bring in Mike Denbrock from LSU as their offensive coordinator to open up their passing game or open up their offense a little bit. And they brought in some pretty good wide receivers. Remember Chris Mitchell from Florida International, a name that we talked about potentially coming here to South Carolina as maybe being an ex-receiver. Very sought-after guy in the transfer portal. Had a great season a year ago at Florida International. He's joined Notre Dame. Also, Bo Collins, one of the better receivers from Clemson this past season, also going to be out there as a target for Riley Leonard as well. And, of course, we know Notre Dame plays really good defense, one of the best ones in college football a season ago. So they're always going to be in the mix. They're always going to be in the conversation. Can't count them out. And then you get the group of 5. And I just kind of looked at this based on what the FPI says are the best group of 5 teams as of right now, because, again, that opens it up to literally anybody, it seems like. Boise State, UTSA, Tulane, James Madison, these are the teams that have been in the mix as the best group of 5 teams that originally only meant they were going to be in a New Year's Six bowl game. But now you get a spot in the college football playoff as the top one. And who that could be, who knows? Because those conferences seem to be wide open and those spots seem to be wide open. But that in and of itself, all the names I just ran through, roughly about 25 names of teams as of right now, a conservative estimate in contention for the college football playoff as we sit right now in June. And again, that's conservative. Because again, there's going to be teams that are going to come out of nowhere. Teams are going to have great seasons based on, who they're bringing in the portal, their recruiting classes, all that kind of stuff. We're not even thinking about as of right now. They're going to matter in October and November. And again, it goes back to the point that I brought up at the beginning of the hour. Does it change the value of the regular season? Sure. Being undefeated and having one loss, you can do worse now and still be in the mix for the college football playoff. But I can't tell you, I can't sit here and lie to you and say that I'm not excited about the potential of so many teams being in the mix as we get later and later in the regular season. We'll get used to it. There's going to be growing pains. There's going to be unintended consequences. That's part of the change in college football each and every time we see one of these things. But it's exciting, at least to me, and hopefully it is to you as well. Alan weighs in on the Firehouse Subs text line. I can accurately predict this. You will all not be happy with the playoff and will want it changed after next season. I guarantee it. Take it to the bank. That's going to happen. With every change, there's going to be something that happens that upsets a lot of people. Now, the 14 playoff avoided controversy for the most part until we got into last season when you left Florida State out. That really soured people on that pretty quickly. But the funny thing to me is when we get down to Selection Sunday for the college football playoff, when that team that's ranked 12th, assuming they're in a power conference, gets left out because that spot's going to belong to a group of 5 team, that's the people that are going to be the most upset. Because you're in the top 12, but you're not in the 12-team playoff. And if I had it my way, I wouldn't go with automatic qualifiers. I don't think just because you're a conference champion, you should get in or get a first-round bye. I still think it should be the best 12 teams competing for the college football playoff national championship. And if you're a group 5 team in the top 12, congratulations, you're in. If you're outside the top 12, tough luck, try again next year. But this system we have in place, and again, there's going to be upset people, but at the same time, right? If you're 12th, you probably have at minimum 2 losses, right? Or as opposed to a Florida State who got left out as an undefeated team, there was no data points to say, well, you shouldn't have lost this game, shouldn't have lost that game. Your argument's a little bit harder if you're a 2 or 3 loss team making your argument again, because we can specifically point to, hey, we should have won that game or you should have won that game. It's not going to be perfect, but your argument's a little bit weaker at that point in time. We're all going to learn. We're all going to figure this out as we enter this new realm of college football. But the mystery of it is very intriguing, right? And the unknown is so cool in a way to think about. I'm excited just to see it all unfold and to see what teams are going to be talking about when November rolls around, when December rolls around, as we see who takes up the 12 spots in this inaugural field. And again, plenty more conversation about this to go through the summer and as the season approaches, but I felt like today was the perfect opportunity to really break down who I feel like can comfortably say are in the mix as of right now and see who emerges as the season rolls along. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, we're going to jump into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. While it's a slower period for college football, camps, recruiting, all that stuff in full force over the month of June. More commitments coming in for South Carolina as well. We'll dive into all that. Also get a camp update from Wes Mitchell as he's out at another day of Shane Beamer football camp today as well. That's all coming up in the next hour of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. All coming up next right here on The Game. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Wes Mitchell out at another day of Shane Beamer football camp. We'll check in with him in just a couple minutes. I feel like we're just so hit or miss. We can't get all three of us in studio at one time because there's so much going on with these camps, as we've talked about plenty. The month of June, while, for this upcoming season, very slow. Guys are on campus doing workouts and stuff like that, but not a whole lot going on from this team standpoint. But you guys working your butts off right now when it comes to these recruiting and camps.
Yeah, I mean, July is maybe the 1 month, Tyler, where the college football world slows down a little bit. That is really the only time of year. There are some pockets here and there, but for the most part, the month of July is when, Shane Beamer and his coaches will actually get some vacation time and maybe get out of the country or, not spend time around the facility. Some players will remain in town and things like that, but team workouts.
Sure.
Team meetings not going on as much that month. So, yeah, recruiting, though, they are still working out. I mean, we were over at the indoor facility in the practice fields. They've got a 7-on-7 camp right now, which is at the old Proving Grounds practice fields, the new practice fields, and the indoor facility. That's the 7-on-7 team passing camp going on. And then they've also got the O-line, D-line camp, once again, out at Williams-Brice Stadium. And inside the weight room and right outside the weight room, Carolina's football team is working out. So certainly still a lot going on this month. Official visits are continuing. They've got another official visit weekend coming up this month. We'll save that for later in the week to talk about that, of course. And there will be another big recruiting event at the end of July. But, yeah, still a lot of recruiting activity going on right now.
Well, nonetheless, and we go back to what we talked about at the end of last week, Shane Beamer has put out a litany of welcome homes just in the past week alone. We're slowly starting to learn more and more about who all those welcome homes are, including a mix of those guys being officially announced over the course of the weekend. It's pretty notable names in here as well. Just kind of start off here. We'll go with A.J. Holloway, the linebacker out of Buford, which for anybody that knows, the state of Georgia, Buford is a powerhouse program that produces really good talent and seems to be a good get for South Carolina out of there as well.
Yeah, Holloway, like you said, does come from a great high school program. There have been, you're more familiar with it than me, Tyler, but I mean, how many guys has Buford put out over the years?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and really you could go around, some of them gone to Georgia, but they've got kids at Bama, Georgia. I mean, they've sent them to everywhere. So certainly when you get a kid from Buford as somebody that's going to have played high-level football against and with other Division I guys typically. And Holloway's interesting because I've seen him in person, not playing a football game, but just been able to size him up. And, he's listed at 6'3", 225. I think he's probably every bit of both of those. Those are legitimate measurements. Physically, he's impressive. He looks like a guy that, if he was over there doing the workouts with the guys right now, you would be like, yeah, I mean, that's a sophomore or a junior. Like, he's a physically impressive guy. Ranked by the On3 industry ranking, which, again, for those who don't remember, that's a weighted average of all four major recruiting services, On3, 24/7 Sports, ESPN, and Rivals. And those are all kind of thrown into a mix. Some of the services are weighted a little heavier than others, but he's a 3-star prospect, number 85 in the state of Georgia, number 93 linebacker in the country. So this isn't a guy that's incredibly highly ranked, but it is someone that South Carolina has recruited a while, and he does have the size. He has a pretty good offer list: Auburn, North Carolina, LSU. So he's got some high-level offers. And, again, he's someone that the staff has been on a good while. And I think his official visit earlier this month was really just kind of the last step in this recruitment. Checked all the boxes he was looking for. Staff seems to think he's a guy that has some versatility where he could, maybe play inside as a Mike, but also could play will linebacker, could possibly play, even go blitz, rush the passer a little bit. Kind of a Mo Kaba, kind of maybe skill set there. The thing I'm not really sure, Tyler, is just the speed. Like a lot of people, well, 6'3", 225, that's awesome. How fast can he run? That's the thing I really don't know aside from just watching the film, right? But seems to have some characteristics that South Carolina likes.
Is that the speed? What can be the difference between him potentially being a 4-star guy and a 3-star guy?
It can. That can be one thing. And look, you can't. There are certain guys like, I mean, this happens in Georgia a lot. Like in smaller towns in Georgia or smaller towns in South Carolina, like a Jaquel Hallman out of Blackville. Like they're really good players that you look at them and they just check all the boxes. And it's just about maybe somebody offering first, or maybe they're just kind of a little bit diamond in the rough. You can't really say that about a guy from Buford. Like
right.
Everybody knows Buford.
Sure.
They get very heavy foot traffic. You don't look at it and say, not that On 3 ranks off of offer list. They don't look at an offer list and say, this guy's got this many offers. We got to make him a 4 or 5-star.
Right.
Clearly, that's not the case, as evidenced by the fact that he does have a pretty good offer list and is a 3-star prospect. So, yes, that can be the difference. It can just be film. It can be kind of incomplete data. It can be about just wanting to see a few more different things over the course of a year. So, Holloway plays for, again, a big program. He'll be seen this year by scouts, and so he'll have every opportunity, I think, to make a move up in the rankings.
Well, as important as it is to get guys out of state, just as important to get guys in state. And another commitment that we learned over the course of the weekend, Shedrick Surratt out of Gaffney, 4-star offensive tackle. You look at his size, 6'4", 300, about right in line with what South Carolina's done over these past couple of years out of their offensive line recruiting class, and just adding another piece to, again, an area of the team that, Beamer and company have recruited very well these past couple of years.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think there's two different angles here. Number one, getting Surratt himself, and then number two, and maybe we can kind of expand throughout the show on this. I mean, the offensive line recruiting for South Carolina has been quite good. I had somebody ask me last week, actually, while I was working camp, like, offensive line has spanned several coaches at South Carolina, like Lou Holtz, Steve Spurrier, Will Muschamp, Shane Beamer, and there have been some NFL guys in there in the past, and there have been some years where the offensive line, or some spots where the offensive line has performed pretty well and kind of gelled together. But overall, that's one of the positions that you could fairly look at and go, man, why can't they be a little bit better there? And I'm not talking about last year. I'm talking about over the course of like 10 years, 15 years.
Right.
And it's a fair point, but I think it comes back to, the kind of guys you're recruiting. And so, Surratt is 6'3.5", 290. He's a guy that South Carolina's seen. This is the number 5 per the On 3 industry ranking, the number 5 prospect in South Carolina in this class, and a 4-star guy. On 3, particularly high on him. They've got him individually ranked number 181 in the country, just regardless of position. So this is a kid who's got size and some versatility, who can move. So that's another good get. But then you start looking at Surratt along with the rest of the offensive linemen they're recruiting, right? Like we talked about the 2023 class that they brought in. Trovon Ball, Tree Babalade, Marquis Anderson. You look at the last class that they signed with Josiah Thompson, who I saw milling around at camp last week. And he looks outstanding. Blake Franks, Cam Pringle. Like, they have started to stack some talent there. And offensive line is a developmental position, right? More than many others. So what I'm trying to get at is, if it's not going to be this year what it will be in 2 or 3 years, right?
Sure.
Assuming that South Carolina can keep that room intact, assuming that South Carolina's staff can develop those guys to kind of reach the potential we think they have, and of course that everybody stays healthy, much more than last season. Now you're starting to see the makings of a group where they're starting to stack some talent that they can bring in and develop.
Now, where do you kind of straddle that line? Because when you look at, and you guys do a good job of breaking down the scholarships on Gamecock Central, where the guys at those tackle spots are relatively young. I mean, the most experienced guy coming in is Parkside of the transfer portal, but Babalade, Kaysen Henry, Shivers, Thompson, Pringle, all those guys still have several more years of eligibility left. So you obviously want to bring in guys for the competition side of it, but at the same time, guys also want to be able to go places where they know they're going to have an opportunity to slide in and hopefully start right away. So where do you kind of straddle that line between wanting to have competition, but also wanting guys to come in thinking they have a shot at making it into that starting lineup relatively soon?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, there's some guys in the 2025 class that they're working on right now that they've said, hey, we feel like you can come play early because, I mean, they do try to portray, and I think they do have a very competitive atmosphere on the team. Offensive line's just a little bit of a different position, right? Like if you're recruiting a quarterback and you've got a stud freshman, right, and then you've already got another one committed, like it's hard to go back because there's one ball, right. One quarterback plays. Offensive line's a little bit different because for one, you know, you recognize that it's a more developmental position. If you're playing, forget starting. If you're playing at this level as a true freshman offensive lineman, you've either got a bunch of injuries or you're really good. Right. You know, maybe both. Right. It's more developmental. You also, as we know, South Carolina and other schools, they cross-train guys. So there's opportunities to play more than one position. That's good for your pro career. That's good for the college level. So I think they don't really look at it, whether it's players or coaches, as much as, hey, how many tackles are on the team? I mean, people look at that, right? But they are young. It's not super established, so there's opportunities for lots of guys to play. And some of those guys you just mentioned have positional versatility where, whether it's this year or in the future, they could play more than one spot, and you're kind of picking the best five.
And that seems to be the kind of guys that, you know, South Carolina likes to get, and we talk about Rashawn Lee a lot and his versatility, where he's, you know, naturally best at center, but if you need to move him out to a tackle spot or a guard spot, he can do that as well. And again, especially when you run into as many injuries as South Carolina did a season ago, the more versatile guys on the offensive line, you know, the better. So if you do come in as a tackle type of guy, having the ability to move to guard, move to center, whatever it may be, you know, opens you up to more possibilities, what you can do, depending on how things shake out around you.
Yeah, it does. You know, and there are some guys, like Josiah Thompson, as talented as he is, he could play other spots.
Sure.
But there's not many guys that you can say that guy can play left tackle, you know?
Yeah. Which is the hardest position
on the field. And, you know, there are a lot of guys where you can say that guy could play guard, center, right tackle. He's versatile. Great. But there's not a lot of guys that have the size, the footwork, the mentality, the IQ to play left tackle, and Josiah is one of those. So, to me, it would be surprising if Josiah is playing anything but left tackle.
Sure.
He could play other spots, but he's one of those guys that you need to have there and develop there. Some of those other guys that you mentioned earlier, you know, maybe some of them could be a left tackle, but I think more likely in the short term to fit in somewhere else.
Well, speaking of the lines, another day of Shane Beamer football camp. A lot happening with the trenches. We'll check in with Wes Mitchell, see what's going on with those 7-on-7s. Once again, that's coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
I was just sending a text to my colleague Wes Mitchell about how hungry I am, and it is 11:14 a.m. And so, of course, he's probably going to say, well, Chris, why don't you just use the Rapid Rescue to go to avoid the wait and order online at Firehouse Subs. There are 14 locations around the Midlands, so wherever you are around here, you are not far away from a Firehouse Subs. To find the one closest to you and to use the Rapid Rescue to go to avoid the wait and order online, you can go to firehousesubs.com, or you can download the Firehouse Subs app. That's my favorite way and Wes's favorite way to do it. You can find the one nearest you. You can order any of your Firehouse Subs favorites, or check out the barbecue Cuban sub, Southern Roots with a Cuban twist. It's still here, but only for a limited time. Make sure you check it out. If you use the app, you can earn yourself some rewards toward future purchases. That's firehousesubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head and Chris Clark here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Of course, talked a lot of recruiting in that last segment. Wes Mitchell out at another day of Shane Beamer camp. Another day seeing a lot of the guys in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line as well, some 7-on-7 stuff. And Wes, I'll start off with this. You know, Chris and I talked in that last segment looking at one of the big commitments from South Carolina that got announced this weekend in Shedrick Surratt out of Gaffney, 4-star kid that, really kind of adds to what has been a very good run of offensive line prospects for South Carolina. In your opinion, Chris gave his thoughts in the last segment. How do you kind of rate what Beamer and company have been able to do over the years when it comes to building what is hopefully a great offensive line, for years to come?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the best I've ever seen it in South Carolina, honestly. And, fans can maybe roll their eyes if they want because obviously Carolina had the injuries, and then they really struggled on the O-line last year. But just in terms of high school recruiting on paper, and, you got to remember, a lot of times these guys take a little bit of time to develop. So you're not going to see those immediate returns on the offensive line in terms of high school recruiting like you maybe would at other positions. And so I think you look just the last few cycles and the guys they've brought in and just the both quality and quantity they've brought in at that position. It's probably the best back-to-back classes that they've ever had. I think they're continuing that in this class. Shed is a kid that they've been in on for a while, kind of were able to get ahead of the pack on him. You look at some of the offers that came in the spring and kind of early spring, and, this ended up being a really big offer list, SEC schools, ACC schools, but, the chance to stay at home, the chance to play for the Gamecocks, obviously won out here. But you look at what Lonnie Teasley, Sam Sorbet, Greg Atkins, all those guys have done in recruiting that position. It's very, very impressive. And I maintain that is a position you want to recruit from the high school ranks. We'll see where Surratt ends up. I think he's maybe more of an interior guy. We'll see. But I think especially at offensive tackle, you look at, we've talked about it, bringing in Isaiah Thompson. You're not finding just excellent day one left tackles in the transfer portal. So you got to go recruit them from the high school ranks. And, that's something South Carolina's done.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, man. And before you came on last segment, I was talking with Tyler about that exact thing about stacking recruiting classes, because I had somebody ask me last week who was kind of under the impression of like, man, across multiple coaches, Holt, Spurrier, Muschamp, Beamer, like there have been some great players. And yeah, even on the offensive line, there have been some NFL players, but it seems like the fan perception and even the media perception and just kind of the analyst perception of the offensive line is that's a spot that could be a lot better. And so what I brought it back to was just what you're saying, recruiting. Like you have to stack not one class where you go, okay, they signed a couple good offensive linemen in that class. You have to sign a few really good on paper offensive linemen, I think, in every class to be able to build an offensive line that can eventually be one of those offensive lines that, I don't even know if a dominant O-line exists, Wes, these days, but just the type of O-line that you need to compete at a high level.
Yeah, no, I think, man, if you think about it, just from a pure, we're getting back to basics here, but when you just look at it from a pure number standpoint, you play out one quarterback, you're playing 3 wide receivers or 2 wide receivers, depending on your offense. You're playing 1 running back at the time and maybe 2 or 3 total in a game. O-line, we always talk about that 8 number. Like you need 8 guys, so you need your 5 starters, and then you need 3 backups that you feel comfortable with. And so I think when you look at that position, just the sheer number of guys, for one, that's why it's so hard to have a dominant O-line is, you're going to miss on some evaluations. It's such a developmental position. Some guys maybe are great in every single aspect, but just might not be big enough to play at the SEC level based on the measurables. So it's hard to find those guys, and you just have to recruit basically with I would say an understanding that even if you evaluate and develop well, that maybe half of them are really going to actually turn out and be what you're wanting. And so I think that's why you do have to stack the classes. You can go in the portal and supplement. We've seen South Carolina do that on the interior. I think that helps a little bit. But in a perfect world, I don't know if this exists anymore, but in a perfect world, I think coaches would love to recruit their entire O-line out of the high school ranks, let them get used to playing together and let them kind of gel together and maybe even play alongside each other for a couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And speaking of offensive linemen, Wes, let's turn the page over to camp today. We're out there. Well, you're out there. I was, and then I will be once we finish the show here today. There's an O-line, D-line camp going on in Williams-Brice right now, as well as a 7-on-7 tournament. And one of South Carolina's top targets for the 2026 class, which seems like they've been recruiting several guys out of that class for a long time. One of them is an in-state target, Desmond Green out of Timberland. Can confirm, because I was over there earlier, he is there, and he is still big, as he has been for the past couple years. He had Greg Adkins and Lonnie Teasley and Sam Serbay, recruiting assistant, who does a great job on the O-line, all following him around all the stations, watching him. Have you gotten a chance to go look at Big Dez yet, or you been hanging out at 7-on-7?
Yeah, I'm being a skill guy, Chris.
Okay. That fits.
Not hashtag trenches, I guess. But you know, guys, if you look at by the way, did y'all just hear Ben Cato? Because I did. Shout out to Ben.
Yeah,
to Ben Cato there.
We did. We just
Cato
wanted to give Ben a little extra airtime there.
Hey Ben, hope you're well. Everybody go check out Cato's. Awesome people. But you know, Big Dez. I mean, this is another one. Carolina got in at the right time because I got his profile pulled up right now, and it's like South Carolina offer, Georgia, Florida State, Clemson. I mean, that's the first ones that pop up, and then it goes on and on and on. Auburn, Alabama, Virginia Tech, Kentucky, Tennessee. So, I mean, that tells you, like, I think we start to look at this 2026 class, which is guys that are rising juniors right now that will be juniors this coming football season. And, you know, the state is kind of loaded, in my opinion. 2025 is solid, but 26 has a chance to be really, really good. And Dez is right there, one of those guys that has been a priority target for South Carolina for some time. I think you look at the measurables, he's going to need to reshape a little bit. But, again, we're talking – he's got 2 years of high school left. So there's a lot of projection when you're talking about a 2026 O-line. But there's already some guys in the state of South Carolina that are kind of early offer guys. You know, you look at Baxter at South Point, Zion Giles from Carver's Bay.
Yep.
I mean, anybody who's been following recruiting knows I say the word Carver's Bay. If you're an OG recruiting person, you're like, they're probably related to the Gethers, which is, by the way. And you're like, okay, offer that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Then you see him, and you're like, he needs an offer. Yeah, and then, of course, the receivers, Wes. I mean, Jordan Gidron from Ridgeview, Donovan Murph from Irmo. We'll see Donovan Murph and his Irmo High School team at 7-on-7 on Wednesday, I believe. And so a lot of really good players in that class. Let's, with the last couple minutes in this segment here, Wes, let's talk about the 7-on-7 a little bit. I know you've been over there checking things out. A couple guys I had my eye on earlier from Heathwood, big-time DB, and then also a receiver from Riverside that South Carolina's been keeping a close eye on.
I've been glued to the Riverside game. I actually watched those guys 3 straight games, and the reason for that was I was just kind of paying attention, and Dal Loggins was glued to the Riverside game as well, which reminds me a little bit. Last week, Dal Loggins was glued to Cutter Woods' game, the quarterback from Westside who's committed to Wake Forest. And then, lo and behold, this weekend he gets an offer from the Gamecocks. So Dal Loggins was definitely cued in. This is a kid that is committed to Cincinnati, but I think is still maybe open to hearing what other schools have to say. And Dal Loggins was really locked in. Shane Beamer came over and watched one of his games. And reminds me, just from a skill set standpoint, a little bit of like a Jaheim Bell, like a hybrid tight end, receiver, H-back. You know, I think he's maybe more of a receiver at the current level, but maybe more of a tight end at the next level as you kind of project out as he grows and all those things. But impressive kid, impressive athlete. Ran a 4.59 at the Under Armour camp, early this spring, and just someone I think we'll continue to track here moving forward, Chris.
Good stuff there, Wes, and we'll have Chris out at camp coming up on Wednesday as the busy month of June rolls on. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, have a good one.
Got to talk some baseball coming up next as we finally have things settled as far as the head coach goes. Some movement happening in the transfer portal. We'll hit that coming up. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
No, when I talk about our friends Michael and Nathan and integrated media, a lot of times we're talking about audiovisual stuff. So we're talking about TVs and tricking out the man cave and Sonos wireless speakers, streaming on your favorite devices and all that good stuff. And definitely, they can do all that for you. That's their bread and butter. But something else that they do an awesome job with that you may not know as much about is their security and camera system. So if you think that your residential or commercial business property would benefit from a surveillance system, they can do it for you. Integrated Media Inc., that's integratedmediainc.com, or give them a call, 803-948-8327. They've been to my home. They've been to West Mitchell's home. They can come out to your home or business, the guys at Integrated Media can, and let you know how a surveillance system could benefit you. Network, HD cameras, low-light cameras, and 24/7 motion-based recording. They can do it all for you. IntegratedMediaInc.com, 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Ed and Chris Clark along with you on this Monday. It feels almost kind of weird that our dominant headline of the day is not necessarily baseball related after we spent pretty much the past 2 weeks talking about, for one, the head coaching search, and then obviously Maneri, the name popping up a week ago. He officially gets announced on Tuesday. Hear from him on Thursday. We broke down what he had to say on Friday. Now we're kind of, I don't want to say the hay's in the barn necessarily, but now we're kind of coming down from all that, and we have to wait 200 some odd days until the season starts to see what this team's really going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fascinating time because this is the part that I think everybody's excited about now that you get past the actual coaching search is, all right, what's going to happen with the roster, right? That's an important part of this. Obviously, the coaching staff's important, but you got to have players. I mean, that's something that Paul Mainieri talked about over and over at his press conference, and that's right. I mean, if you go back to, you pick a sport, baseball, football, basketball, you go back and look, yes, a lot of teams that have had great coaches have won titles for sure. I mean, but you're going to look back at any team that's won a title and you're going to be able to pick out, wow, that team was loaded with talent. You know,
right.
You don't see teams scrap their way to championships normally. They normally have lots of at that level talent and guys that end up going and playing at the pros. We were talking about that last week, Tyler. Look back at South Carolina's 2010, 2011 national title teams. Lots of guys that made it to the pros. Some guys that didn't, that were just really, really good college players and then very mentally tough, right? That is ultimately, I think, what you want to be. But we're now at the point where the coaching staff, got your head coach in place, you got Monty Lee back, you got Hendry, you got Terry Rooney. You feel good about the staff. I think most fans do. But now it's, okay, what's going to happen with the roster? And that means, hey, will Cole Messina come back or not? We honestly don't know that yet. He's going to be
tomorrow is the evaluations when they start.
Yep, he's going to be out at the MLB Combine, so getting poked and prodded and all that good stuff. So we'll see how that goes based on the feedback. What will happen with the high school class? What will happen transfer portal in and out, right? So they've gotten some pieces, but Ethan Petrie is not going to hit the portal, which is fantastic. You've gotten some commitments from the portal / JUCO ranks that will, are expected to bolster this roster.
Let me ask you this, because you did talk with Ethan Petrie and Cole Messina last week, pretty much the day after that Mainieri was being announced as the head coach, where they hadn't really got the chance to really meet him yet. They had the Zoom in or, talk with him or whatever, because they were in various parts of the country at that point in time. But are you surprised Petrie was so easy to get to come back, if that makes sense, where he maybe didn't take as much time to think about that? Because, again, he's a sought-after guy, and I imagine there were going to be a lot of offers on the table for him to go to a lot of other places with NIL and all that kind of stuff. Are you surprised it was that quick of a decision, seemingly, for him to want to come back?
Not for him, not for Ethan. For others, I might have said, well, yeah, I was surprised it was that quick, and that would have been okay, too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, We're in 2024. Things, in college sports are a little bit more open market to where if a coach leaves, you've now got an opportunity to maybe leave too. Even if the coach doesn't leave, you've got an opportunity to leave in the offseason. So I think, look, if Ethan had surveyed the situation, I think as long as he, gave the new guy a chance, right, and kind of felt things out before immediately jumping in the portal, people probably would have understood, regardless of the decision that he made. But I'm not surprised by it. That's just kind of the way he explained it to me. I mean, he can explain it better than I can. Is just he's a loyal kind of guy, and he came here for a reason. And he told me, hey, I'm not going to chase money or even, chase after a team who maybe is right on the precipice of winning it. He said, not chasing money, not chasing championships. I want to win here at South Carolina.
Sure.
And, I think that's something to be applauded. And you would have understood if he said, hey, I came here to play for Mark Kingston, and Mark Kingston's no longer here, and I've got some other good options. I'm going to check them out. I think you'd have to understand that, too.
Yeah, and obviously he's going to be the catalyst of what this offense is going to be next season. And, you're likely going to lose a guy at Messina, and unless he decides to come back, which, hey, wouldn't be mad about that by any means. But now, like you said, it is about building that roster and, seeing what you can do in the transfer portal. And they brought in a couple of, interesting names so far from an offensive standpoint. We learned at the end of last week, Caden Gaskins coming in from Northwest Florida State College. And, talk about somebody that's really set the world on fire from an offensive standpoint down there in the JUCO ranks. He's certainly done that. Now he played second base for Northwest Florida State College, but was listed as a utility player, somebody that you can move around in a variety of roles, very fast, speedy on the base path. So he's somebody that you could kind of seemingly fit into just about wherever you need him to, it seems like.
Yeah, and leaning on Jack Veltri, his story on Gamecock Central here, But Gamecocks, this didn't come up last minute, right? After the coaching change, they had been recruiting Gaskin since midway through his season at JUCO ball. And Monty Lee, kind of led that charge. And, of course, Parker Noland, who played second this year for South Carolina, is out of eligibility. And so, something that Caden Gaskin pointed out is they've got some power hitters in this lineup, like an Ethan Petrie. If Messina came back, he would certainly qualify. And he's a little bit different type of player. Like you said, Tyler, the speed. He hit 403 this past season. He did have 7 home runs, 59 RBIs. But he had 79 hits, 21 doubles, and he stole 41 bases, right? So this is a guy that certainly you could get on the base pass. He hit for average this past season, got on base a lot, and then he was able to make some things happen. And, that can be a weapon for you, certainly, for South Carolina.
As well, they added Dalton Mayshore out of St. Mary's, an outfielder that was their second best hitter on the team, hit 338 on the season with 13 home runs. Another guy pretty good on the base paths with 11 stolen bases himself. And he's somebody, he led off for St. Mary's this past year, and they're a team that did not make it to the NCAA tournament. Very consistent hitter. He had 26 hits hit in 26 of their final 30 games to close out the season. And I look at the fact that Austin Brindling also going to be out of eligibility going into next year. You're trying to find who's going to occupy that leadoff spot. I think Dalton Mayshore and Caden Gaskins can make a good run for that himself, especially with how proficient he is on the base path. These two guys could be your competition for that leadoff spot.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And we saw South Carolina shuffle the lineup at times this year. It'll be interesting to see what Paul Maneri's philosophy is just on lineups. Some coaches, if will shuffle things up a little bit more. Others will just kind of ride it out. But certainly when you look at these two additions, it's a couple guys that could fit the bill of a leadoff hitter. And I think with Mayshore, again, a senior guy, this past year he had a breakout season. He had his best year by far. He hit 338, did have 13 homers. And here's another one, Tyler. He fielded 994, right? So
there's those statistics
with just one error. So that's certainly something you like seeing if you're a Gamecock fan. So
sure.
Yeah, with his combination of, being able to hit for average does bring some power to the table, but being able to hit for average and, being able to be a threat on the base pass early in the lineup, Gaskin, they might fit that bill.
And I know these aren't the sexiest names coming from JUCO and St. Mary's and stuff like that, but these guys could definitely be key pieces to this team next year, in addition to what you might be able to get from an Alabama or a Texas or something like that, which I'm sure those kind of guys will come as this process goes along, but not too bad gets for Paul Maneri within his first week.
No, I mean, I think you don't have to get the sexy names, right? I mean,
but that's what people pay the most attention to.
They do, but I mean, like Kennedy Jones, right. Like that name, like he was a pretty sought after transfer, but he didn't transfer from Florida.
Sure.
I think these are the type of gets that you just look at them and can they fill a role and can they fill it well? Right. And certainly on paper, this looks like a couple pretty potentially substantial gets that could really help you next year.
Absolutely. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. A former South Carolina assistant, perhaps leading the best dynasty in all of sports right now. With that coming up, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour on the game.
All right, let's tell you about our friends over at Krantz Cooling, family-owned business, HVAC here in the Midlands since 1983. And I can personally attest to how awesome their team is. They have been out to my home, and I like them so much, like the experience so much. I sent them out to my mom's new home in Irmo, too. They put in mini splits for both of us. My mom's is upstairs. Mine's in the garage, so now we can go out there. It's cool and comfortable in the summer, nice and warm in the winter. If you need a second opinion on something at your home that you've been told, give the guys at Krantz a call, 803-672-3224. Train in Mitsubishi. They've got financing. They service your home right here in the Midlands, air conditioning, heating, and preventative maintenance. Krantz Cooling with a K, krantzcooling.com or 803-672-3224.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you on this Monday. Now, before we went to the break there, I teased that a former South Carolina assistant might be at the helm of the best dynasty in sports right now. Do you have any idea what I'm referring to by chance?
I don't. I feel like you're going to be like it's esports or something.
It is not.
Okay.
The Birmingham Stallions
yes.
have won their third straight championship. Past 2 years USFL, this past year UFL, led by none other than Skip Holtz.
That's right.
Defeated the San Antonio Brahmas 25-0 in the UFL championship game yesterday. I'm sure you had a big watch party for this going on at your house. Skip Holtz, in his time in the 3 seasons with Birmingham, 26-4 overall record, and like I said, 3 straight championships.
Not bad, huh?
Not bad.
That's not bad at all.
It is kind of funny, and look, we I don't want to say dog on these spring leagues, but they're definitely not as watched as a typical football league would be in the fall. But it is kind of interesting to see the mix of coaches that end up like Wade Phillips, Skip Holtz, Bob Stoops was coaching a team. Spurrier won that AAF championship a few years ago. Like, it's definitely like the coaches that don't want to commit to being full-time on like an NFL team or a college team. Like, hey, just, take a couple months in the spring and coach some more football. Why don't you? But Skip Holtz is making it work.
He is, man. He's doing well with it. And, the interesting thing is now some old-timers, Tyler, would, and they might call in here at the end of the show or send a Firehouse Subs text. They would remember that, Lou wanted Skip Holtz to get the job here.
Okay.
After he was finished. Skip it was a little up and down in college, but he had some good teams at multiple spots. Do you remember his first coaching stop?
Wasn't he at Connecticut before here?
He was at UConn. That was when they were at the division or the 1AA level back then. And his last year in 1998, they went 10-3 and went to the quarterfinals. But he was at ECU. I mean, his last 2 years at ECU, they won 9 games each. South Florida first year was good. They fell off there at the end. And then he went to Louisiana Tech and kind of sandwiched in the middle there, had some really good teams. I mean, had a 10-win season there, had a few 9-win seasons. His team, in fact, Tyler, 2017, I think it was, they came down to South Carolina and just about beat the Gamecocks with LA Tech. I mean, it took a Brian Edwards, long pass that got them in position to, or was it Ortrey Smith, I think, actually. But, I mean, the Gamecocks, squeaked by in that game.
Does that fall into the same category of the former players that have left South Carolina that end up biting them later on down the road without kind of falling into the same way?
I think that is not as much of a phenomenon because, I don't think you see coaches from a former staff run their own program and come back here and hand out losses. You don't see that as much as players doing it.
Right. Well, shout out to him. 3-time champion of spring football, now the United Football League, the Birmingham Stallions. Now we have to wait another 9 months for spring football
What
to
are we
return?
going to do?
What are we going to do?
Now, I did, so I was watching one of those games the other day, and I was, honestly, and I'm not trying to dog it, right? I mean, I probably should watch it a little bit more because I don't need to complain about how there's no football and then there's actual football.
Right.
And lots of guys, whether coaches or players, that are actually recognizable. Yeah, I remember that guy. I remember that coach. I remember that player.
Right.
But, I mean, there was, nobody at the game.
Yeah, and it, obviously football is the king sport in America, but like the NFL, college football, it is still very much star-driven to a degree. But because when you watch a game where you don't know the names, I mean, AJ McCarron's on one of those teams out there, but outside of that, you don't know too many names. It is tough to, to get engaged with it because you really don't know the talent that is, that is on the roster out there.
Well, NFL is just so king. I mean, they have a monopoly on football. We've seen many leagues try to rise up.
That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
All right, I want to tell you about our friends over at Classic Roofing. Joe Reeder, Max Sawyer, both longtime residents of the Palmetto State. with families who live here. To get more information on Classic Roofing Services, 803-590-7870 or go to classicroofingsc.com for more info on their services. And for a free estimate with a wealth of experience spanning more than 20 years, their team of experts at Classic Roofing is well equipped to handle all of your roofing requirements. So whether it's a residential project, a commercial undertaking, or anything in between, their team has you covered. The mission is simple: provide you with top-notch roofing solutions that not only protect your property, but also enhance its curb appeal. Again, that's our friends Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer at Classic Roofing, 803-590-7870 or classicroofingsc.com.